So here's my idea, here's my thinking. On this subject of archaeology in the Bible, on this subject of the interrelationship of scholarship and faith, faith is not to have the evidence that proves something to you. That's knowledge. Faith is to believe even if at the moment you don't have the proof, so to speak, of what you're believing in. Faith is the hope of things not seen, according to the New Testament definition of faith. If you have something proven, it is a logical contradiction if you have some who accept it and some who don't. What you have instead of proof is an interpretation. But all interpretation of the Bible is not accepted across the board by the archaeologists, the scholars, the ministers, or the public. Each one of us has a different amount of knowledge to bear on the question. That is the point. That is why I argue that proof is a subjective matter. It is not objective in any way. What is proof? It is when there is enough evidence that has accumulated on a particular point that someone personally accepts that point as valid and understood, and they believe that's how it happened. That's what proof is. No two scholars read the same materials the same. They certainly don't interpret the same materials the same. For instance, I had a questioner ask me about the proof of the Dead Sea Scrolls for the Bible. What about the Dead Sea Scrolls, he asks. What about the Dead Sea Scrolls? Herschel Shanks has gathered together numerous scholars, James C. Vanderkam, Robert Eisenman, various different biblical scholars, Frank Moore Cross, and they have interpreted, Norman Golb, they have interpreted different facets of the Dead Sea Scrolls differently than some of the other scholars. They simply don't agree on what it is proving, or who the Qumran community was, or where the scrolls came from yet. All we have is a bunch of Jewish writings that give us more problems than answers. And that's the nature of biblical scholarship, as I've pointed out in numerous of my videos. The Dead Sea Scrolls at one point was said to have proven that there were two messiahs, not just one. Well, that's not a Christian doctrine. That doesn't prove Jesus Christ was the Messiah in any way, shape, or form. This doctrine of the two messiahs is even argued about. Does it mean two? Does it mean one? Some scholars will read the scrolls and translate it as two. Others will translate it as one. Who knows? Grammatically, you can interpret it both ways. That's the wild thing about all of this. A scholar can translate the text differently than another scholar. It depends on the scholar's knowledge and ability to read the texts in the first place. Then the next question is, does he know about that particular era in time and place? Does he know everything about all of the various different sects that were alive in that era, and who they were, and what they were expecting, and what they believed, etc.? All of this is still up in the air. The Dead Sea Scrolls do not prove the existence of Jesus Christ, the anchor of our faith. But does that mean the Bible's wrong? Not at all. It has nothing to do with that. That is a faith proposition, not for the archaeology to prove or disprove. It cannot do that. How are you going to propose proving archaeologically that Jesus Christ was the Son of God? How would you go about doing something like that? Just show me how. If you think archaeology is the end-all, be-all of proof for the Bible, prove that to me. Demonstrate how you would do it, and show me that your possible interpretation archaeologically is going to be accepted by all of the other archaeologists. Have you ever thought of doing that? Just try that exercise. This is the age of the internet. You can look up the scholars at the universities now. You can actually communicate with the biblical scholars and archaeologists. You get your archaeological information together, and you show those archaeologists how you can prove archaeologically that Jesus Christ was the Son of God, born of a virgin, and died for our sins. That's the whole point of the Bible. From you Christians and anti-Mormons who argue with me that the Bible has been proven archaeologically. Demonstrate the entire point of the Bible archaeologically then. It can't be done. But does that mean it's false? No, it does not. Can you prove it archaeologically? I really don't see how you can. So when you keep bringing up archaeology and keep bringing up all the biblical discoveries that archaeology has demonstrated true, you have to understand that is your bias interpretation. It is not objective fact that all of the rest of the world has to see, or else we're all going to be damned to hell while you're saved. That kind of thinking doesn't even enter the biblical scholar's mind. It doesn't even dawn on the biblical archaeologist that they think if my interpretation is rejected, everyone else is going to hell. If you think that's how they think, I'd like to see a demonstration of that. I haven't seen it yet, and I've read dozens of them so far. Criminy, I'm producing videos showing you the evidence against the proposition. And you still keep bringing up more and more and more like you have the archaeological proof. No, it's not. How are you going to archaeologically prove to anybody that Jesus turned water to wine? How do you know that's not just a made-up story? You don't. You have to accept that on faith. You know, how do you know Jesus had the Last Supper? You don't. There are no eyewitness accounts. Raymond Brown, in his book 101 Questions on the Bible, the great Catholic scholar, demonstrated really powerfully, one among many hundreds of biblical scholars, he's demonstrated powerfully that none of the Gospels are eyewitness accounts of the events we read about in the New Testament. They were later written back onto that time, and it was their interpretation, it was their theological agenda, so to speak, that produced those 4 different portraits of Jesus in the New Testament. Does that mean the Bible's phony, though? Not at all. But how are you going to archaeologically prove that Jesus said what he said and did what he did? You're not. You can't do that archaeologically. Why does it have to be archaeologically in order to be valid? I don't see why that has to be. Archaeology is the weakest discipline to demonstrate historical truth. And you still just don't seem to gather that information in. You seem to think archaeology is the best way to prove the Bible, and it's not. I've got bad news for you. Is that threatening to the Bible? Not at all. I know Christian archaeologists out there. I read their works. There's Jewish archaeologists who accept the Old Testament, who are trying to come to an understanding. But they're not using archaeology as the anchor of their faith. None of them do that. That's more of an academic exercise. Archaeology cannot prove. It can help illustrate. It can give us some background information, and even that changes through time. There's no final proof and word that this is the way it is. You know, they're still arguing back and forth over whether Judaism had the apocalyptic outlook or not. That is, did they think they were in the last days during Jesus' day? That's still being argued. I don't know if you're aware of that or not. Everything in the Bible is still being rehashed. Read the scholarly journals if you think I'm bluffing. I know what they're going through and what they're saying because I read them. Obviously, someone who comes along on my videos and makes comments below the videos that I'm fighting the Bible and that archaeology has proven the Bible, we have the artifacts, you just don't understand how archaeology functions at all in any manner. Archaeology is a two-edged sword. I guarantee you archaeology is not giving you proof of only your theology. I can prove that easy. There are archaeologists who claim there is archaeological evidence that God was married. And they don't mean the pagan gods, they mean the biblical God. Well, that's certainly not an anti-Mormon or much of a Christian doctrine. But that's what archaeology is demonstrating. The archaeology of the Council of the Gods and the pre-existence and all that, because of the texts and the interpretations of the texts, there's a lot of doctrines coming out now that most people would be absolutely horrified about. So be careful using archaeology. You cannot use it as proof. It is impossible. But does that threaten the Bible? No, it does not. That's the weird type of thinking that is going on that I'm trying to correct. If it's not archaeologically proven, that proves the Bible's false. That is a wrong-headed thinking. Let me give you an illustration of this. In Herschel Shank's book, The Mystery and Meaning of the Dead Sea Scrolls, he discusses on page 64 and 65 the idea of the Beatitudes that were found in the Dead Sea Scrolls. There were Beatitudes that had been discovered. What the scrolls show is that in almost every respect, the message of early Christianity was presaged in its Jewish roots. And even the life of Jesus, as told in the Gospels, is often prefigured in the scrolls. Now notice this, he's not talking about proof that Jesus Christ existed. There's no talk of proof here. That's not what they're interested in. Blessed the man who has attained wisdom and walks in the laws of the Most High. Blessed is he who speaks the truth with a pure heart and who does not slander with his tongue. Well, there goes the anti-Mormons. I guess you're not so blessed according to the Dead Sea Scrolls. Your attitude sucks about the way you misalign and malign Mormonism. So you might take a lesson from the Dead Sea Scrolls. Blessed is he who seeks wisdom with pure hands and who does not go after her with a deceitful heart. This passage is found in the Dead Sea Scroll known as 4Q 525. The literary genre to which this belongs is the same as that found in the Gospel of Matthew. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted, etc. That this literary form is not unique to Matthew is hardly surprising to students of the New Testament. Luke in the Sermon on the Plain recounts a parallel but slightly different version of Matthew's Beatitudes. The apocryphal Gospel of Thomas also contains Beatitudes. In Luke and in Thomas it is the poor who inherit the kingdom of heaven. Obviously the content and even the form of the Beatitudes change from composition to composition. But like other aspects of Christian belief and literature, they are not unprecedented. The pre-Christian Beatitudes found in the Dead Sea Scrolls are part of the Jewish heritage on which the Beatitudes of the Gospels are built. Now, in all of this, what you cannot say about the Dead Sea Scrolls, and what you will never find any Dead Sea Scroll scholar or any Bible scholar or any Bible archaeologist saying, if you think I'm kidding, go find one and bring them over. They will not say these Beatitudes outside of the Bible found in the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Gospel of Thomas, they prove Jesus taught his Beatitudes. They prove Jesus existed because obviously someone was teaching Beatitudes, Jesus taught Beatitudes. Therefore, the Dead Sea Scrolls prove Jesus Christ was alive. That is what you cannot say about the archaeological discovered Dead Sea Scrolls. In this instance, they don't. The scholars never say that. The most you can say is just exactly what Shank said. Beatitudes as such are not a completely unique and foreign element. Therefore, seeing and reading Jesus teaching Beatitudes makes perfect sense. You can understand the philosophy of teaching through Beatitudes, and that's all you can say. The Beatitudes in the Dead Sea Scrolls were not said by Jesus. They were said by someone else in another time. That's what the Dead Sea Scrolls prove. It gives a flavor of a reality to the teaching of Beatitudes, and that's all you can say. It still doesn't prove Jesus ever existed. It doesn't prove Jesus taught his Beatitudes. Even if it was a word-for-word quotation, it wouldn't prove that. You can't find a biblical archaeologist who will say that. There really are people who are still convinced to this day that Jesus Christ never even lived. Now, people like me and you who hear that are astonished. You say, you gotta be kidding me. For real? You don't even believe that with all the materials and evidence we have? And they say, no, we don't. There again, proof. What is proof? There's a misunderstanding about the relationship of proof and evidence. None of this refutes the Bible. None of it refutes the Book of Mormon. None of it refutes the Doctrine and Covenants and the Pearl of Great Price, or the Bhagavad Gita, or the Egyptian Book of the Dead, or the Talmud, or the Mishnah, or the Zohar, or any of the alchemical materials, or the Hermetic doctrines. None of this refutes it, but it doesn't prove it either. That's the point. Hey, neighbor. That's the whole point. There is no proof. It is interpretation. That's the best we can do, man. I didn't make it this way. I'm just simply showing you the essence of the scholarship on these issues. That's all I'm doing. I'm just simply pointing out to those anti-Mormons who argue the Bible has been proven archaeologically that your thinking is wrong. Nobody even thinks in those terms. You read this book, The Mystery and Meaning of the Dead Sea Scrolls. It's a fairly new book. It's not the newest one. Peter Flint has a great one too. This is 1998 by the Biblical Archaeological Society. You won't find anywhere in this book any talk of the Dead Sea Scrolls proving Jesus existed or proving that how the Bible is written is accurate, actual history, and that's the reality. You will not find it, because that's not how the scholars think. I know I'm sounding like a broken record. I'm well aware of that. But you keep repeating the same stupid argument to me. And then you're condemning me for fighting against the Bible. I'm not doing anything of the sort. I am a Bible believer myself. How many times do I have to say that? Just because I don't accept your interpretation of the Bible doesn't mean God is mad at me and he's going to send my soul to hell. That is just stupid. That doesn't convince anybody. You want to convert me out of Mormonism? Quit damning me to hell, you idiots. That's your first piece of advice. For crying out loud, man. Get real just a little bit is all I'm asking you. Start reading. I know you're not reading this stuff. I know it because I know how the scholars think because I read them. And your attitude and your assumptions and the way you approach archaeology and history and the Bible is not the scholar's attitude. If you think it is, I defy you. Find those scholars and show them to me. Go ahead, make my day, punk. To quote one of my favorite movie stars, you think you've got scholars on your side? Bring them out. Give me some names. Let me talk to them. Is that asking too much? Apparently it is. You're not doing it. Anyway, that's my message to you anti-Mormons who keep bringing out this silly, worthless argument about archaeology proving the Bible to be true. You haven't brought forth any evidence yet that proves anything, except how wrong-headed you are in your approach. And that's why I'm not going to follow after you. I'm not going to lose my faith for your incorrect thinking. You got another thing coming if you think you've got a strong case against Mormonism with that kind of thinking. You have failed completely. I promise. And if you do find Mormons who lose their faith and join you, take them. You go right ahead. That's okay. Doesn't bother me at all. I know where my faith is firmly founded in, and it's not in archaeology. I promise. It never will be. Because archaeology cannot prove religious truth. And that's the point of the scriptures. Not as a proof physically. If you think that's what the point of the Bible is, you're wrong.